Well, thank you. Wearing this hoodie because it's the topic of my speech. So I'm glad to be here. And AJ and Shad, I want to 100% associate myself with your comments. Being in DC since 1993, I see the war we're under, and it makes you want to get out of DC for sure. So let me start here by saying that I want you to write these three things down. I learned from Senator Mark Maynard, my last speech, he really wished he wrote the stuff down, so I'm going to give everyone that advice this time. If you want to get anything done in DC, you have to use brute force. Because you're always up against the status quo, special interests, risk-averse staffers and members. Number two, and this took me a long time to learn, and I wish I learned it in 1993 when I got on the Hill instead of 2020, but I'll pass along. Politics is war by another means. It goes back to AJ and Shad, 100%. It's going to be either freedom or starvation. I'm going to say that more often, but because I want it to sink in. But every time they are doing something, the end goal is starvation. They don't say it, but I know it as a history major. That's how regimes end. You either have freedom or starvation. So having met many of you over lunch and dinner, I see everyone here as either a Sam Adams, Paul Revere, George Patton, and Margaret, you're definitely George Patton, and Bill Halsey. So the only thing I ask of you is don't give in and never give up and recruit more patriots. So, and I mean that. I'm standing before patriots. And three, and I love this one, and if I was a little bit tired or more caffeinated, I'd say more about it, but I'll just say this. Bureaucrats cannot take a punch in the nose. Bureaucrats cannot take a punch in the nose. If you highlight their abuse in DC, you can oftentimes influence policy, but you got to do it directly. You got to impact their lifestyle. You got to impact their day-to-day, because they do it to the right all the time. They subject conservative staff members. They subject Trump's conservative staffers to FOIA requests of their scheduling, to harassing lawsuits, to misinformation, to harassing their kids at school, and no one ever does that to the career bureaucrats. We don't FOIA their schedules. We don't file lawsuits against them. We don't have a Facebook page of the political bureaucracy that is delaying, denying, and subjugating the will of the president. So they get away with it. So those are the three things I want you to take away from this speech, and then I'll continue. So as I stated before, and I really am impressed by Shad and AJ, it's freedom versus starvation, and I intend to eat well. So, and I have eaten well, thank you. So, one thing I see that happens is people get distracted by the shiny ball. And again, I got to reiterate that we will have a balanced budget someday. We can have 0% unemployment. We will prosecute the Epstein terrorists, et cetera, but the left will continue to march us towards starvation while we focus on everything else. So you cannot take people have to be prosecuted for their crimes. We got to get the finances in order, but I'm afraid we're going to have a balanced budget and no food, because the left is very good at the 100-year plan, and we're worrying about the next election, the next month, etc. So the goal here is to bring in a large number of reinforcements. It only takes 1% of the population to flip the power in this country. So you have a 1% of the LGBT, the BLM, the CRT, the DEI crowd. I easily know that we have far more reinforcements out there, and all you got to do is ask them to join. You're the courageous ones. Bring them along, because we will flip the narrative if we get vocal and active. But and sometimes you need Margaret to you need Margaret, who has a iron fist inside a velvet glove. So my job as a lobbyist is to make everyone here more effective. But I do want to note that there are many members in this crowd that I want to point out. First, the real political power in this country is going to go towards the town and city councilmen and the county commissioners and the water board members. That is where the power is going to flow to in this country in the next 20 years. So if you want to start influencing policy, start there. Run for those offices. Support your elected officials in those offices. And the way that a county commissioner or town councilman, city councilman, or water board, soil board member can influence federal policy is become more powerful. Member of Congress recognizes power. Power is money or social media influence. If you get 100,000 followers because you took a stand and you're a county commissioner, the member of Congress is going to keep you real close. Why? Because they don't want a primary. They don't want a competitor. They will do what they will strongly consider doing what you want them to do. So that's how you can influence your federal representative. So I think so for everyone serving in those offices, you have a very powerful job, and you work with members of Congress. You don't work for them. And I used to have a friend who used to teach sheriffs how to fight back against the federal government. I think we do need to bring that program back. I think we need to just throw out the feds when they're overreaching and let the sheriff deal with them and empower the sheriff to deal with them. So that's a little off topic, but I do think we need to remind people that the power rests with the people back home and not in the federal government. And far too often, because we're kind people, we need to be more courageous to say, you're out of line, get out of my county. So we also have state lawmakers here, and my personal hero is Senator Mark Maynard, West Virginia. Every time we meet, he continually teaches me new ideas on how to be effective as a lobbyist, and also his patriotism for this country. He was in session yesterday, got here around midnight, and he's here today, and you'll see and hear from him after my presentation. But state legislators also have a role. They can sponsor legislation to get the federal government out of their state. We have to be smart about it because we have to worry about the supremacy clause. But again, we start throwing the federal government out of our states, we get more control of our land. Now, obviously, some of you live in some horrible states, beautiful land, yeah, beautiful land, but horrible political conditions. But I would argue that a state lawmaker can develop legislation, and all it takes is one state to do it, and it can branch out into other states. But to remove the power of the federal government to intervene on your land. And one topic that is ripe for Congress and love to work with people here who have influence with their members of Congress, is to strip the federal courts of jurisdiction over certain issues. The role of Congress is to set the jurisdiction of the federal courts outside of the Supreme Court. So there are too many lawsuits on a certain issue. Maybe we should consider stripping the federal judges from having jurisdiction over it. So once the agency makes a decision, it's done with. Now that's bold movement. We've done that once in 20 years. And so there's very few members of Congress who remember it, very few staffers who were there, but I was there. So that's something else we should consider as a tactic to control our lands better. So for the non-politicians here, and that is everyone else, and I mean that I should say farmers, ranchers, landowners, recreational users, your goal should be to get in the ear and eyes of a member of Congress and get their cell number, and then find out effective ways to talk to them. Like Senator Maynard just showed me how to use text, send later, but it brings up a point. I can communicate, when I communicate with a member of Congress, I oftentimes become aware of their habits. Oh, this guy reads all of his texts at night. So I make sure to send him a text at night. Why? Because it's at the top of his list when he starts his work. If I send it when I wanted to get it off of my plate and on his, send it at 2 o'clock, he's probably on the House floor voting, and then he's got 16 other meetings to go to afterwards. So it's buried. But if I know he's replying at night, send that text at night. If I know he reads all of his texts at 5:30 in the morning, I now know how to time my text delivery and have it sent at 5:30. The worst thing people do, and I saw it 1,000 times as a lobbyist, they'll send me an email at 2:30 because that's when they got done and they wanted it off their plate. Well, when I came into work as a staffer, I was already 100 deep for the day. So unless I liked you, I really couldn't help you. Or it was delayed because I didn't see it. So it's all about how you communicate. And one of the things that, so when you're back home, there are 3 ways you can develop a relationship with a member of Congress that you don't know personally. 1, become a donor. 2, become a grassroots volunteer standout. Like be the person that can bring together 200 people for a rally on something local. 3, become a public policy expert that they rely on. Those are 3 ways that members of Congress will bring you into their orbit and listen to you. And that's the goal, to be heard, because if you have the winning argument, you will prevail. Or you'll learn that they're risk averse or bought off by somebody, and you're right, but you won't get what you want. And but when you're back home in the district, know your district director, because they do have access to the member of Congress. But if the district director is your main entree into the office on a legislative matter, just realize that someone in the DC office will typically block that person from getting to the member of Congress because they have another interest involved in that legislation. It could be political interest that wants the member to stay out of that. It could be a policy difference. It could be a risk-averse angle. And having worked for a Republican whip, and the Republican whip is the person that counts the votes, they'll oftentimes tell you, we don't have the votes, and that's when Margaret and I asked, show us the whip count, and they didn't have one. They just assumed with a 1-vote majority in the House of Representatives, they could pass legislation, and they actually did. So now that you're one of the 3, it's whether you're a donor, you're a grassroots volunteer, or a public policy expert, it's how you talk to a member of Congress that can actually decide on your success. Member of Congress wants to know how he can help you right away. So start off very succinctly, state the goal and the problem for this meeting. Don't delineate all the facts and then say, hey, we want you to contact the Ag Secretary. Start off the meeting by saying, I have a problem with the waters of the United States of America, and I need you to contact Secretary X. And so now they're going to think about, throughout the rest of the meeting, how they can help you, who they're going to call, et cetera, instead of wondering how they can help you and what's this meeting about. So hit them up first, up front, with what the problem is and what you want them to do. If it's a dune sagebrush lizard amendment, say, hey, we're impacted by that listing, and we want you to offer an amendment to defund the listing of the dune sagebrush lizard. That person automatically knows, hey, I know I can do that. I can sponsor an amendment before the House Interior Appropriations Subcommittee, and that's how he's going to process it during the meeting. Hey, I can help you, instead of wondering how I can help you, because he doesn't know what the problem is. So it's always succinct. And I do tell you, I mean, this is a good handout here, but Ben Burr and Simone, Blue Ribbon Coalition, this is a good handout to give to members of Congress. Very succinct. Now, if you have something more detailed, put it behind it. But the member of Congress is only going to process that much at most. So I want to highlight that. Just front page 1 and 2. That's how they process, because their day when they're in Washington, D.C., will start at typically 6 a.m., because a lot of them work out. Then they read the briefing books. Then they have a fundraising breakfast at 8 o'clock. Then they go to conference meetings at 9 o'clock or hearings from 10 to 12. Then they have either a fundraising lunch or constituent meetings until 5 o'clock. And then there's nighttime events they're invited to, or nighttime fundraisers. So they're going from 6 o'clock a.m. to 9 o'clock at night very easily. And they don't have time to read briefing books, but they have time to understand one-pagers. So the last thing I will point out to you is members of Congress serve on various committees. For this crowd, it's the House Natural Resources Committee, it's the House Interior Appropriations Subcommittee, House Appropriations Committee, it's the Senate Energy Natural Resources Committee, Senate Interior Appropriations, and Senate Environment and Public Works. If they serve on those committees, they have influence over the agencies impacting you, plus the House Ag Committee and the Senate Ag Committee. They have influence over those agencies. If your member's on the small business and he writes a letter to the Department of Interior, the Department of Interior has to prioritize requests from members of the Committee of Jurisdiction. So it's more impactful when your member does serve on the right committee, but it's not fatal, it's just more impactful. So my goal here is, I want to leave time for questions, but I want to give you my cell number, so please grab your phone, your pen. My cell is 202-631-4883. Text me your name and let me know you're a member of Congress and if you have influence with anybody else, because when we're working on killing the administrative state and preventing the war and preserving freedom and stopping the march towards starvation, if I know that you can offer an ESA amendment through a member who serves on the House Natural Resources Committee, I want to take you up on your offer. And if you don't know how to lobby, I'll teach you how to. It doesn't take a long time. Tracy Barton was very successful in her first trip to DC last year. So we'll call it the Tracy Barton program. So I'm glad to answer any questions.
All right, Bill. Great job, Bill. Is there any questions for Bill? Excellent, excellent. Yes, sir. We got one right here.
So through the NRCS FSA programs, when they're not, we're having a problem in our neck of the woods in Roswell. And there's short staff. They don't know how to run the programs. Who do we kind of go through up higher up to get things done? We've had some flooding and that sort of stuff in a couple of years, 2 years in a row. And I know y'all all had some flooding down here, and I don't know how some of that is affecting the system.
You build a case in the media that they're inept and that you need help. And then if your member of Congress isn't being helpful and the agency isn't being helpful, you try and make it an oversight issue and have Congress haul on the agency and say, why aren't you addressing this issue? And when the bureaucrat's exposed like that and has to come before the committee, they don't want to do that. So you got to make it a political play by getting Congress to do its Article 1 oversight. And look, there's a lot of things that need oversight in Congress, so the more publicity you can give the issue, the more likely a member of Congress is going to make it an oversight issue. So that's why you got to make it a publicity issue, and then try and get another member of Congress to address it as agency reform, agency-wide reform. And because you need to reform the agency, this is why you need to reform the agency. So that one's a double bank shot because you don't have a committed member from New Mexico. You actually have one woman who likes to cuss at congressional markups.
All right, we have one right here.
More of a comment. Thank you so much for bringing up the sheriffs. My husband is sheriff of Otero County in New Mexico. It's very interesting. On the west side of the Mississippi, the sheriffs serve as really constitutional sheriffs, and they have a huge role to play, and they are really, really, really active on the ground for farmers and ranchers and rights and public lands and those types of things. East of the Mississippi, they're kind of paper pushers. They push a lot of just, subpoenas and that type of stuff out. But the sheriff's office is under a huge attack too. So we'll head to Western State Sheriff's Conference in a couple of weeks. And the office of the sheriff is under fire. Same thing that you guys face, we just face it in a different way, but they're after them because the sheriff is a very powerful position. And so if you have a local sheriff, make sure you're using him as a resource too to help you with your fights, especially west of the Mississippi, because this stuff is talked about at their conference as well.
No, thank you. And I've seen the FBI come in and on a trumped up charge, take away the sheriff's gun. So now he goes home, he can't defend himself or his family, and he's the most powerful law enforcement official in the county who's made significant enemies. So you got to back up your sheriff. And I associate myself with your comments 100%. We have to protect the sheriffs.
Okay, Bill. No, over here. Over here.
I hear you.
Blinded by the lights.
I got scared for a second.
I just want to say something that Bill tells me all the time, like when we have a really good response from a member and he'll go, that's a gold bar, put that in your pocket, right? Well, he just gave you his cell phone number. And I'm going to tell every one of you in this room, that's a gold bar, put it in your pocket. I do not go into a member's office in DC without him unless there's no other way, and he's just too busy. But he tracks what every member is doing. He follows all of our issues. And once he understands what you need, he knows which buttons to push. And so I just want to say that if you took down his cell phone number, you are very smart people.
All right, give Bill a hand. Thank you so much, Bill. Very informative.